It's a cold, dark night. You just finished your nightly ritual before settling into bed. It was quite the day you had. A shudder spreads over your body as you recall the coyote you saw while out hunting for game. One look at its eyes, and you made sure to keep your distance. They were far too human for your comfort. You heard the animal's howls on your trek home, but they always sounded as near as the first time as its cry traveled across the forest. When you finally made it back, those haunting howls ceased, but your dog, tied to your front porch, was clearly disturbed by something. It acted panicked, but there was nothing you could hear or see wrong. Unable to calm your companion, you headed inside. Now as you lay in bed, a cold realization washes over you. You haven't heard your dog make a sound since you went inside. As you sit and ponder, a soft but consistent knock sounds at the front door. Hello everybody, today I wanted to talk about one of my favorite cryptids, the Skinwalker. Specifically, how we go from the traditional Navajo legend of a Skinwalker to the pop culture representation we typically see today. For example, something like this.
This is Cruisers, man! That's crazy shit. It's driving me like a goddamn...
Now, I feel like a lot of horror communities online typically get this right. The Skinwalker really is the traditional Navajo style of a Skinwalker, so it's typically... its origin is something like it's a witch that's gone through a dark ritual. It can shapeshift into animals. It's not necessarily like a creepy looking human. And it's something where it's like the tell of the Skinwalker is its eyes, right? And it's more of like a bad omen than it is like a creepy monster haunting you. Outside of horror communities, I think there's a lot of misconception about what a Skinwalker necessarily is. And the point of this video isn't to talk about exactly what a Skinwalker is. I feel like there's a lot of really good videos already on YouTube that go over that. This is more so just analyzing how Skinwalker goes from the original Navajo legend to the weird pop culture mishmash that we see now. And so talking about this is difficult because as a Navajo legend, there's not a lot of written history about the Skinwalker. So it's not like I can go through and be like, okay, this year the Skinwalker legend was this style of incarnation. This year it was this. It's hard to keep track. It can change from Navajo legend to legend. It doesn't even necessarily stay the same within the Navajo themselves. But I do feel like there's some points that you can make, especially when we're talking about online culture, about how it's kind of been confused as to what the real legend actually is. Sometimes it's not even necessarily labeled as a Skinwalker itself, but people see some kind of creepy creature on video and then say, oh, that's a Skinwalker. So I think the first one, and this is less of an evolution of the story and more of just a confusion, but I see a lot online where somebody has a video of what's obviously a Wendigo and it gets labeled as a Skinwalker. And if you're not familiar with the Wendigo, it's a slightly similar legend as a Skinwalker. So typically it's the legend of the Wendigo it's someone who was given a choice. They were starving to death and they had an opportunity to either preserve their humanity, accept their fate and die, or give in to their hunger and resort to cannibalism. And then the act of cannibalism makes them become this evil creature, right? They're like possessed by this dark spirit. And it gives them like that pale, sickly appearance. It's emaciated. Something that Wendigos are depicted a lot with in popular culture is having horns, but that's not actually in the legend. There's no horns. It's really just like this bald, emaciated creature that crawls around, which if you've ever heard of the trawler or the rake, those cryptids or creepypasta monsters are very obviously taken from the Wendigo legend, its appearance at least. And then something that is different from the Skinwalker legend though, with the Wendigo, is that's a permanent transformation, whereas the Skinwalker is, the witch that kills an animal, takes its skin, wears it, and becomes a creature that it shapeshifts into that creature. And Wendigo is just a permanent transformation. It is what it is. And so that's something that I see a lot that's like commonly referred to as a Skinwalker, right? You see this video of a crawler or the rake, and then typically that'll get labeled as, Skinwalker caught on camera. And that's not necessarily a evolution of the story, as I'm going to get to, but it's more so of a confusion of the story. So I think that's kind of like one angle you can take from where the Skinwalker came from and where it is now. Something I'd like to go a little further in depth on is more so of an evolution of the Skinwalker story. Part of the horror of the Skinwalker legend is the horror of finding some animal outside and it's just acting too smart, a little too off, right? Its eyes are too human. It's this horrific idea. And that sort of plays into the uncanny valley. And I think this is really where the Skinwalker story kind of goes from point A to point B, where you have the traditional Skinwalker story, which is still playing on the Uncanny Valley, but it's typically about the creatures that you see, unless of like a human looking thing, right? Something that looks human but it's not totally right. Now anything that's human looking but isn't completely right, that gets referred to as a Skinwalker. And then you can kind of tie the Wendigo even back into that, because the Wendigo also is slightly human looking. It still retains that human form, maybe not so as much as the Skinwalker though, but the legend still, you can see where there's that tie-in, that similarity to the two. But really it's like a Skinwalker has become a stand-in for like the Uncanny Valley, the mimic, right? Think about something, if you've seen Gemini Home Entertainment, a great analog horror series, the woodcrawlers in that are typically, a lot of people refer to them as a Skinwalker because it's a Uncanny Valley mimic of a human that's just not quite right. When you see that in other, especially a lot of analog horror, typically likes to play up on the Uncanny Valley idea. And I think the Skinwalker is almost like this catch-all term. I think it's really interesting. I guess you can take it one or two ways. You can either say the legend has been completely ruined, or you can say that the legend has evolved into something different. But I think regardless of the fact, just this idea of Uncanny Valley, mimics, all of that, and how common that story is, even in other cultures, right? Like there's other examples of a mimic type creature, Uncanny Valley. Even the idea that we as humans have this fear of something that looks human but it's not quite, that's part of the creepiness, right? Like it's creepy, and I think that's why the Skinwalker tends to be so scary to people, because it plays on the Uncanny Valley fear. And it's like, why do we even have this fear? Why do so many cultures have stories of creatures that play on the Uncanny Valley and can mimic humans? Why is that such a common thing throughout history? So it's just kind of this scary idea, right, of like what used to be, what lurks out there. And I think it's interesting, Skinwalker online culture is this fun, creepy creature to talk about, whereas an actual Navajo legend is something that they really don't want to talk about. It's a very bad omen. You don't talk about it, otherwise it'll come to you. It's a very evil presence for them. But yeah, let me know what you guys think, if I'm on point here, or where the modern Skinwalker interpretation comes from. And consider subscribing if you like this type of video. And thanks for watching, that means a lot. I will see you in the next one.